Let's start with the big ban. Trump's taken off of major social media. They say for life. They say permanently. You say right move, and in fact, they waited too long. Why?
Well, I actually didn't want him taken off originally because I thought they had the right attitude that he was newsworthy, even though he violated the rules pretty regularly and that other people would have gotten suspended or kicked off. Most of this stuff was, even if offensive, was not rule breaking. But then he started really badly to break the rules in the last year. And then, of course, right after the election, where he really was causing a lot of problems. And so what he kept doing is sort of one-upping Twitter in terms of what awful things he could say and causing problems, doing lies, and especially at a really tense time. And so I think they really did, they should have expected it, is what I think, is that they sort of bred him to behave like this. It's sort of like having a kid and giving them endless sugar and then wondering why your kid is, diabetic and crazy.
And bouncing off walls. So,
yeah.
but never gave him a suspension. It went from, having some comments underneath posts to you're gone for life. I mean, that's like 0 to 100, right? I mean, is that appropriate?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't a very tense time right in the middle of these riots that were happening at the Capitol. And so he was, I think a lot of people feel, and as more evidence is beginning to show up, the danger the people inside the Capitol were actually in, and his tweets were fomenting that. So I think probably to cover themselves, especially at that moment of crisis, probably they have a good excuse to do so. I think the big question is not so much the ban, because he did deserve it. He did break the rules over and over and over again, and other people have been kicked off for much less. So, that's sort of the justice system too, right? Some people get one sentence, another person gets a different one. And so what was really the issue is what they did before and how long it took. And also, I think more importantly, why are these systems built this way? So someone like President Trump can abuse them in such a fashion. And in fact, not abusing them, using them exactly as they're built. And so that is the bigger question: is this is the group that got us into the mess, and now they of course had to clean it up. But I think let's not forget the first part, which is they got us into this mess.
What was the first time you saw a post from the president and you said, okay, this is not on, this is not acceptable in this environment?
I don't even remember. There's so many of them. I think when he was talking about insurrection, it was a similar kind of thing when he was sort of tweeting about insurrection. I wrote a whole column about it saying, wow, he's really getting right to the edge of this. And I can't remember what it was, but it was about insurrection, and maybe it's a good idea, which was unusual coming from the president. Now, again, people have their rights to say these things, but on Twitter, you often get, if you incite violence, there's two bright lines for these sites, which is one is child pornography and terrorism. I guess there's three, and then incitement to violence, which is right next to terrorism. And so he really did cross that line, I thought, a while back, a couple times, very closely at least. And then this time, I think he really did incite violence. And so they were within their rights to do something. The fact that Mike Pence was in such danger while Trump was tweeting these sort of angry tweets at him is really problematic for the president. Now, different sites, Facebook suspended him indefinitely, which is probably permanent, would be my guess. But everybody did a different thing. And the whole issue is we're sort of at the mercy of these is basically two people, Jack Dorsey, who runs Twitter, and Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Facebook.
Now, of course, there are other leaders, world leaders, that use these sites to directly incite violence. Certainly some of what I've seen from Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei against Israel, they're still up. And I'm not suggesting that undermines your argument, but I am interested in what that means for the kind of standards you think these sites need to have. And is it okay for them to have double standards since they're American companies and they're talking about American leaders?
I think I've always written they're arbitrary. I mean, one of my issues is the arbitrary enforcement is a problem. I mean, that really is, I have no problem removing them too if they are violating the rules that Twitter has set up. I think the issue is these companies, not just Twitter, because it's much smaller. Facebook really is the center of all this. Everybody sort of focuses on Twitter because the media is on Twitter and the politicians are on Twitter. But in terms of size and impact, Facebook really is the whole game across the globe, especially globally. But yeah, I think the arbitrary nature of how they do this, random. They sometimes enforce rules, they sometimes don't. It's largely because this is a small company, really, which is trying to enforce standards across the world. And so the issue is how these things is the architecture of these sites. They're all built for enragement. They're all built for aggression. They're all built for addiction. And so people get sucked up into them, whether, whatever site they're on. And one of the things that was really remarkable watching and listening to the people at the Capitol is they truly believe the nonsense they were spewing. They truly believe it. And it's because they've been, we talk about radicalization with terrorists in the Middle East. These are radicalized people who've been radicalized by lies on these sites. And so that's what I'd like to focus on, is how this happens. And a lot of people have focused on it.